Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the Tina Watson case. Watson died in a scuba diving incident, and her husband, Gabe Watson, was convicted of manslaughter. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So I'll start with the background, move to the incident, and then get to my analysis. Tina and Gabe Watson met when they were students at the University of Alabama. Both worked in Alabama. Tina as a manager of a clothing store, and Gabe as a bubble wrap salesman. Who doesn't dream of a life in bubble wrap sales, protecting all the knickknacks of the world from various types of damage? It really exemplifies the term, living the dream. They would start dating in 2001 and would get married in 2003. For their honeymoon, the couple planned to go scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. Gabe had completed 55 dives and claimed to be a certified rescue diver. As it turns out, this was true, but he had 2 days of training when he should have had 4 days. So it wasn't very good training. Tina had completed 5 dives. She had a medical condition called paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia, also known as PSVT, but was still able to earn a certification just before she married Gabe. The couple flew to Australia and decided to dive at the wreck of a passenger ship that sank in 1911 named SS Yongala. This dive was a bit tricky for both of them. Tina had never completed an ocean dive below 9 meters, and Gabe did not have much open ocean experience. This takes us to October 22, 2003. The couple refused an orientation dive with instructors and initiated their dive near the shipwreck. They were supposed to travel down an anchor line, drift across the top of the shipwreck because there was a current that would move them along, then grab a second line and return to the surface. Before the dive started, Gabe asked for more weight to be added to Tina's weight belt, saying that she would be unable to descend without an additional 12 pounds. So she was at 8 pounds, and the weight was increased to 20 pounds. As they started to dive, Gabe was having trouble with his dive computer. One of the batteries was installed backwards. So he returned to the surface, put it in the correct way, and then started another dive. The couple was only 5 minutes into their dive when Tina sank to the bottom of the ocean, 98 feet below the surface of the water. Gabe made his way to the dive boat, named Spoil Sport, and told the dive instructor what happened. A diver retrieved Tina. He surfaced near another boat named Jazz 2. A physician aboard that vessel tried to resuscitate Tina for about 40 minutes, as Gabe remained on Spoil Sport. Another diver who had been near the incident said that Gabe was bear hugging his wife as she was flailing. After this, Gabe made his way to the surface, and Tina descended to the floor of the ocean. So this didn't look good for Gabe. Gabe had a different story, although his story would change many times. He said that when he let go of the anchor line, the current started moving them much faster than he thought it would. They were both immediately scared. Tina signaled to return to the anchor line, and Gabe saw that she looked worried. He grabbed her, and they were swimming back to the anchor line, although they were having trouble in the current. He grabbed his inflator hose and motioned to her, indicating that she should put air in her buoyancy control device, which would cause her to float to the surface. But she didn't seem to understand what he meant. She accidentally bumped into his mask and air regulator hose, so he let her go to sort that out. After this, he noticed Tina was 10 feet down and sinking quickly. He kicked a few times to see if he could close the distance, but then decided to go to the surface to get help. He said that his rescue diver training did not include tactics for getting somebody in trouble to the surface. One would think that would be the very essence of rescue diver training. If you don't learn to rescue people, what's the word rescue for in that term? This would be like somebody going to firefighting training and then being surprised that a fire would cause smoke. As far as remaining on the one dive boat when his wife was on the other, he said he didn't want to see one of his loved ones being worked on like that. There was a photograph taken by another diver that would become important in the investigation that would follow. He took a picture of his wife that captured Tina in the background, lying on her back on the floor of the ocean as another diver was trying to get to her. Tina's cause of death was ruled as drowning. She had an air embolism but it's believed this occurred during the rescue ascent. What did not make sense was that her scuba gear was working properly. Investigators started to believe that Gabe had turned off Tina's regulator long enough to render her unconscious. Then he turned it back on before letting her sink. There was not enough evidence to charge him at that time. Gabe traveled back to the United States, and in March 2005 filed a lawsuit to recover the cost of the trip after the insurance company would not pay. Gabe eventually dropped the lawsuit, believing he could incriminate himself as the investigation in Australia was ongoing. Tina's body was buried in Alabama. The gravesite was repeatedly vandalized. Various flowers and gifts would disappear. Family members started chaining the items down, but they would still keep disappearing. Eventually, the police took video of the gravesite that captured Gabe removing the items and throwing them in the trash. He used bolt cutters to get through the chains. Gabe was ordered not to return to the grave. Eventually, he was indicted in Australia and traveled there voluntarily in 2009 to face trial. What really hurt Gabe in this case was that he had provided 16 different versions of the incident. Investigators simply could not understand why he didn't unhook Tina's weight belt and inflate her buoyancy control device. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. All but 12 months were suspended. The Attorney General appealed the sentence, and it was increased to 18 months. After his release, Gabe returned to the United States, where he was immediately arrested. He had been indicted for murder by a Birmingham, Alabama grand jury. The prosecution believed that Gabe planned the homicide in the United States before leaving for Australia, which meant Gabe could be charged with murder. The case against Gabe was weak from a legal perspective. The judge would not allow Gabe's behavior after Tina's death to be admitted. In addition, Tina's father had claimed that Gabe asked him to increase Tina's life insurance and set Gabe to be the sole beneficiary. That was ruled inadmissible. The judge would eventually dismiss the case altogether, ruling there was not enough evidence to proceed. It was never heard by a jury. So this brings me to the question, was Gabe Watson guilty of murder? There are many theories in this case. I will analyze two of the major theories. The first theory was that he committed murder. He planned to kill Tina in advance, or maybe he just decided to do it in the moment. The second theory, Tina had a panic attack, which led to her death. It's worth noting that these two theories are not mutually exclusive. Both could be true. Starting with the first theory, murder. This is a popular theory, obviously one maintained by the state of Alabama. In support of this theory is the fact that Tina died even though her equipment was functioning properly. She had air available. Also, Gabe did not render meaningful assistance. Working against this theory would be quite a few items. It was Tina's idea to go diving for the honeymoon. The trip cost $10,000, although relatives paid for it. By marrying Tina, Gabe absorbed $12,000 of her debt. Tina did have life insurance, but the beneficiary was Tina's father, not Gabe, and the policy was for around $30,000. What about the witness that said Gabe was bear hugging Tina? As it turns out, he was probably referring to the rescue diver, not Gabe. He described what Gabe did as an embrace. So he saw two different instances where somebody was making contact with Tina. Additionally, that witness said that when he first saw Tina, she was in distress, thrashing her arms and legs. She looked afraid. He even thought to himself, something terrible could happen here. Next item, why would Gabe attempt homicide on the first of many planned dives? Later dives would have had him more isolated from other divers, so it would make sense that he would wait. The investigation contained many errors. The investigators did not seem to understand diving at all. The last item that works against this theory would be, in the absence of a financial motive, why marry somebody and murder them 11 days later? It just doesn't seem like a pragmatic plan, and few homicides would fall into this pattern. The second theory, again, this was the one that says that Tina had a panic attack. There are several items that point to this. The testimony of the witness I mentioned before, where Tina was thrashing about. She learned to dive in a pond in Alabama. During that training, she had a panic attack. The incident with the dive computer, the trouble with the battery, that Gabe had made Tina anxious. This was right before the fatal dive. And looking at Tina's equipment, she had consumed significantly more air than she should have. I think it makes sense that she did have a panic attack. Of course, perhaps that panic attack occurred because Gabe was trying to kill her. That's where the two theories may come together. I believe this is what happened in this case. Of course, I don't know. This is just my theory. Both Gabe and Tina were not good at diving. Gabe perhaps was overconfident because he had that training, but again, the training was not sufficient. Tina did not have enough experience for that dive. They did not know each other's strengths and weaknesses as far as diving ability. When they let go of the anchor rope, Tina started panicking. Panic attacks that happen in dangerous situations amplify the danger significantly. If somebody's sitting on a bus and they have a panic attack, that's quite painful, probably embarrassing, but it's unlikely it's going to cause death. Having a panic attack several feet below the surface of the water in the ocean is a different story. The difficulty is that an uncontrolled ascent can cause death. Divers have to be careful how fast they come to the surface, in part because of the changes in air pressure, the expansion of air in their lungs. So acting quickly during a panic attack can be disastrous. A controlled ascent has to take place. After seeing Tina panic, Gabe didn't really know what to do, and he started to panic. Perhaps he started panicking after he was accidentally struck by Tina. Even though he should have been able to swim down and get her and help her ascend using the anchor rope, fear got the best of him, and he swam to the surface. His inappropriate emotional reactions that were witnessed afterward probably don't mean anything. I've talked about this before. Nobody knows how they're going to react with that type of stress. People put a lot of stock in what somebody does after an event like that. The emotions are coming and the person just doesn't know what to do. It's not like those emotions are really connected to guilt all the time. Also, perhaps he acted guilty because he was guilty of failing to help his wife. So he had legitimate guilt that people assumed meant he was guilty of murder, when he was feeling guilty about something that was less severe than murder. The dispute over the items at the gravesite could be accounted for by the acrimonious relationship that Gabe had with Tina's parents. They didn't like him even before Tina's death. It makes sense that her death didn't do anything to change their minds. Going back to the question, was Gabe guilty of murder? Not beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think he was. What about in reality? Not just the legal standard, but what actually happened? No, I don't think he was guilty of murder, but I do think he was criminally responsible. I think the manslaughter conviction on Australia makes the most sense. That conviction was really about Gabe's failure to meet his responsibility as a dive buddy. He put himself in a dangerous situation and took a responsibility as part of that, but he did not fulfill that responsibility. He could have prevented Tina's death, but he failed to do that. So what lessons can we learn from this case? First, some activities like diving, for example, are inherently dangerous. People think they have the skill to dive safely, but they may forget that that leads to other obligations, like the obligation to be brave and helpful if another diver needs assistance. Some people who are okay with taking risks are not courageous. Nobody provides a test of courage when somebody's learning how to dive. Second, overconfidence isn't usually problematic, but it can be if the stakes are high. Overconfidence can be criminal in certain situations. Third, some have said that because Gabe told different stories, he was guilty. Assuming that he was lying, not just having difficulty remembering, lies don't always indicate guilt. Some people lie because they're embarrassed, afraid, or worried that something else they did wrong might be discovered. There's no exclusive relationship between lying and guilt. No clear connection where if somebody lies, they're always guilty. Fourth, some people have said that Gabe must have murdered Tina because if he loved her, he would not have left her. This isn't a bad argument. One possibility here, though, is that his self-love was stronger than his love for Tina. Self-love is an important motivator. One could think of it as related to self-preservation, an instinct that can be difficult to override. Those are my thoughts on the Tina Watson case. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.